now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, is Dr. Holly Ludeman, Managing Director of the Livestock Collective. Welcome, Holly. So in 2019, Holly founded the Livestock Collective based on the desire to rebuild public trust in the livestock export industry, one of the things we've just been talking about, by sharing first-hand stories of people throughout the supply chain. And most of you in this industry would have seen a lot of the outcome of that program that's been there. Holly, of course, is an agricultural scientist, an Australian accredited veterinarian preparing assignments and sailing with livestock shipments to the Middle East. And currently she's working with livestock exporter Emmanuel Exports. So Holly's really taken the research that Kieran was just talking and David have been talking about. She's taken it to heart and used it to empower the industry in a whole variety of ways. So Holly's done an enormous amount of work, and particularly with the Keep the Sheep campaign and right through this process. So please welcome Holly Ludeman.
Thanks, Terry. I don't think I need that one. So just checking you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll get a little bit more operational in this third session and hopefully complement what you've heard today from both Kieran and David, and talk a little bit about how we can put these things, grassroots, in action to help build that collective response and earn trust. But first, I'll just reflect a little bit, because I am a veterinarian. And as a veterinarian, I'm trained to solve problems, to look beneath the surface and ask questions, gather evidence, and form often a treatment and a management plan. One quote from early in my career that really sticks with me is, "More is missed from not looking than not knowing." And that's attributed to Dr. Thomas McRae, one of the modern medicine pioneers. And really, in the veterinary sense, that was about honing my diagnostic skills and to not become complacent that common things do happen commonly, and to always look. And you'll find this quote scribbled on the margins of my books, and something that I often refer and reflect on, especially because of these two macaws, Jack and Jill. Now, I can say when Jack and Jill came into my consult room, wearing harnesses on their owner's shoulder, there was definitely a lot I didn't know. And I was a vet, so using my clinical skills, Jack had presented with weight loss, lethargy, depression, but under the history and research I'd done, everything was the same as Jill. They were imported together, they were the same age, they're in the same enclosure, they had the same diet, they had the same health treatments. We did some diagnostic tests, which was also very scary, anaesthetising these expensive birds. Took some blood, did some x-rays, and there were some abnormalities in his liver. So often in veterinary medicine you are doing treatment by payoff. And I'm a little bit nervous, there's more vets in the room than I expected today. Hand up how many vets are here. It's a good sign for industry, but you guys are not allowed to answer any of these questions. So you often start treatment and then see what works while you're finding the underlying cause. And I woke up at 3 a.m. one morning, as you do, and I decided to go have my coffee and watch what was going on with Jack and Jill to kind of get to the root of what was going on. Now, I sat there, I'm not sure that's gone, for a while and realised Jack was very clever. And despite his owners knowing him very well, there was a subtle difference in his diet. I'm not sure if anyone just picked that, but the vets in the room are not allowed to answer. Did anyone see the difference? Well, the reality is the only thing Jack was eating was cashew nuts. And he was so clever that when his owner was around, like a child, he'd pretend he was eating the veggies and then spit them out. So having that underlying cause, we could then put a management system in place, the treatment was in place, and ultimately the prognosis for Jack was very good. But that really consolidated that principle of making sure we look and that more is missed by not looking than not knowing. And I've applied this quote now far beyond my clinical settings as I moved into working in the live export industry, which I didn't expect to go on this journey, and it's a guiding principle to how I approach leadership and even communication. Because in the agricultural industry, as we've just heard, and particularly live export, it was often that we weren't looking close enough and we weren't communicating well. And for me as a young vet coming into the industry, this was really alarming because the industry was proactive and innovative and actually really supportive. And this was a lot more rewarding than private practice because I can tell you dog, cat and horse owners didn't necessarily listen to everything I recommended. So I applied those skills and that problem-solving nature that I had to, I suppose, a different problem. And as a vet, I took a job with an exporter at the centre of, I suppose, a crisis, especially a public perception crisis. And that sign, and that sound, rather, is something that we've unfortunately heard and is the clinical sign that we were at a stage where Australia had shifted from innocent until proven guilty by trial and scrutinisation of evidence to a system of presumption of guilt and trial by media. And the detractors of our industry were loud and proud, they had an emotional argument, and it was very easy for them to prompt a trial by media. Because those of us, like myself, working in the industry, were getting on with what we were doing, getting on with what we were good at, and hoping that the innocent till proven guilty would come to fruition, that common sense would prevail. And they were talking, I've gone to the wrong slide. They were doing it better than us. Meanwhile, industry's response was probably warranted, and this presumption of guilt by trial by media led to a mix of responses I observed as someone new to the industry. There was complacency, denial, confusion, frustration, anger, and to be frank, some non-collaborative behaviour that wasn't serving you. It was also really easy to be defensive and talk to the other side. And probably the best representation of that is Twitter, 6 or 7 years ago, with toxic behaviour from both sides. And we were a few steps behind the kind of strategic method that our detractors had in place. They were on social media, they were in the media, they were talking to banks, they were talking to insurance companies, they were talking to policymakers, they were talking to politicians, and those constant drops on a rock, which I think David alluded to, were well and truly planned out. But the treatment plan that we needed as an industry was to shift from being reactive to proactive and work on those drivers and trust and acceptance that Kieran talked about, your regulation, animal welfare, procedural fairness. And to work on those is because advocacy is like a muscle. It needs constant resistance or it will atrophy. So again, my 3 a.m. in the morning treatment plan, we came up with the treatment tripod because I was employed in the industry at a time where a company at the centre of a crisis wanted help. And I went through the supply chain, audited it. The reality was they didn't need a vet. They just needed to tell someone about what we were doing, how well we were doing it, how well we were regulated, the animal welfare improvements, the research and development that was underway. And the treatment tripod that I implemented, and we implemented at the Livestock Collective, was around communication, connection, and building competency. And it was really important to have all three of those pillars, or the tripod would be unstable. What I learnt very early on, because it was pretty scary, even just putting your head above water, 6 or 7 years ago on this topic. I was told it would ruin my career, that I shouldn't be involved. But I think when something is wrong and you can see you can do something about it, that felt right to me. So I don't know if you remember the Justice League, but that's who I call this team, and a lot of these people are in the room today, and they stood strong beside me, and that's what it was really about. That collective force was going to help with that trust tripod that we needed. I see Andy, my favourite truckie, is in the room, but you can take his place, Jan. Thank you. Everyone loves a truckie. And the collective approach was really needed, where we had people from all parts of the supply chain that could all speak to their area of expertise with authenticity. What also became very clear, like me being up here now, is that we had to, it was time to get uncomfortable. And in that treatment plan, the sense of urgency in a crisis was one thing, which we don't necessarily want to be in all the time, but there was also a sense, as we've evolved over the last few years, just to build competency of people being able to not just be an excellent vet or stock person or stock agent, but also share that information with more people. So the communication piece really has complemented, I suppose, the research that has been done in the industry over the last few years, and I was kind of doing this project simultaneously. So we would make animations about regulation, because it is really important for the wider community to have that overall understanding of how well the industry is regulated, but put it in a way that they can understand. So that's been great, and we've shared that at schools and at Perth Royal Show, and it helps prompt questions like, oh, a vet goes on every long haul voyage, a great information piece to help build trust. It was also really important for us to be in the media, on podcasts, on radio, and getting a group of people that had the trust and the skills to do that. But I suppose the most important piece, if the void of information that we had, was social media. And one of the first posts that I put up on social media, when I put my head above the sound, had 90,000 views within 2 days. So that clearly showed that this was the place to quickly fill that void and to, do the treatment by trial again. So like sometimes you don't know what's going to work in veterinary practice. I was just going to have a go and see what worked, which we'd been too scared to do in the past. And so like Jack and Jill, there was a lot I didn't know about social media and what was going to resonate with people. And we wanted to, share a balance of raw footage and animal welfare, and also interviews and real stories.
Start.
So that video got 4.3 million views. That was just me at the yards one day with the team. But what that created, just raw footage and conversation, was the amount of conversations. We got lots of new followers, and it created conversations that we could then delve into or draw people back to the website to get more information. Oh, don't know that place.
It's more than just driving a truck. So yeah, you got to be half a stockman as well. Try and always trying to make sure you're looking after the cattle.
There's something about a truckie. I don't know what it is about that video, but every time we post it, it gets so many views and likes. Whether it's just because he's a good-looking rooster or that he's authentic. You couldn't pay for that authenticity. That wasn't scripted, that wasn't planned. We sent a film crew to the yards that day. They grabbed a truckie at the yards, and then they grabbed the truckie at the wharf. And that's, I think, why it resonates well on that social media space.
Australia is the main supplier in the world for the quantity of live sheep. It's a part of our food security to have the livestock.
When we've posted things around cultural sensitivities and nutrition, they haven't done as well. And it's been hard to explain that, and it's often been better to have these nuances and more complex, I suppose, arguments or justifications or explanations around the trade have worked better in long form or podcasts or opinion pieces. So not everything works well on social media, and I suppose that's why we were testing and trialling what would work and when was best to share that key piece of information that might help us with the trust and acceptance. And while these touch points of media and social media are critical treatments in our treatment tripod, they're complemented by direct connections. And that's where it was really important, or really rewarding as well, to be speaking to people both within our industry, like this here, and also speaking with the general public. You can also become complacent about people in industry knowing enough to be able to support the industry. And I remember in 2019, a truckie spoke to me. I think I've got a thing for truckies. At the wharf, we were loading, and he'd been working in the industry for over 10 years, but he'd never been on the vessel. He'd come and he'd delivered, and he was amazing. And so here we had someone with a lot of knowledge about the industry, someone who'd been an amazing advocate, but we hadn't really given him the power to do that. So then I gave him a tour on the vessel, the next load he did, and then he ended up doing some social media as well. And so I think that ability to talk within our echo chamber shouldn't actually be underestimated, and we often criticise ourselves for talking in our echo chamber, but empowering ourselves to amplify knowledge and have the right knowledge is actually been something that I think has been very effective in our small projects that we've done. So now we've got a whole group of volunteers that do want to come to the Royal Show with us, and they've got great information and ability to share information and answer questions. So the urban-rural divide can be, seen as a reason for lacking trust and connection, and we can accuse people of talking in the echo chamber, but I think both are equally important from some of the work that we've done. And stakeholders will remember face-to-face engagement. And I think that's where our detractors have been good. They've sat face-to-face and looked the banks, the insurance companies, the regulators, the policymakers in the eye regularly. And so then when there's an issue, they remember that person, and we need to create that environment. And community connection coming from authentic people resonates. So thank you to those that have came and volunteered for a day at the Royal Show, or come to us to university days. All those things help build connection. And connection is really linked to our competency, and that's been probably the most rewarding part of the last few years in a role that I didn't expect to be in, and helping empower that final part of the treatment piece. And I think that will lead to the best prognosis and the best management of our industry going forward, is getting people to see their powers and see themselves as professionals. I reflect back to this conference 7 years ago, and I was awarded the Young Achiever of the Year award. So your investment in me is why I'm here. And our investment in other people is what will make the best possible outcome and exponential impact for every person to have a connection and understand our industry. Because in one post, we did some livestock leaders workshops, so taking people that might work in the yards one day, work on a ship, and see themselves as a professional, have a headshot, practice media interviews, practice how to do a social media post that might be controversial. And in one post from this group of leaders, we could have reached over 100,000 people. And then they share that information. They go out and have a conversation with a taxi driver, someone at a hotel, and that exponential effect flows on. And advocacy is like a muscle. It must be constantly flexed or it will atrophy. And we need lots of muscle fibres to have the biggest impact. The treatment tripod of communication and connection and competency is just a start. We're just a small organisation with a small budget, and we want to help in any way we can empower people to help influence that community understanding. So join the collective movement, and industry support is what keeps us going, so we can do what we do best. We're really humbled to be the recipients of the fundraising auction at LIVEXchange this year. The amazing items you can see to my right. A lot of the funds, along with Regional Men's Health, which is a great initiative, we will be the recipients. And A short video will be played as you go on to the break for some of the projects we do. But the upgrades that we want to do to our virtual reality experience will help us be out in the community, at schools, things like the Royal Show, and having those conversations, because one conversation at a time really can impact the trust and acceptance of our industry. Thank you. Thanks, Terry.
Well done. Can we take any questions?
Oh, sure.
Any questions to Holly?
Don't want to get between you and afternoon tea.
No, I do. Well, looks like no. Oh. So,
you'll see me in.
thank you very much, Holly.
Thank you.
It was a great story. So, thank you.